Hello, if you're in field sales and wondering how you can use AI to actually bring on more sales, win more customers, and improve your productivity, this video is going to be helpful for you. I have been working myself in the field sale for quite some time, working across startups, big companies, and what I found is AI has got a lot of potential, just like other fields, but field sales is something which not a lot of people actually talk about. So I'm going to share some tips and tricks, the way I see these changes are coming and how potentially what it could look like in the future. So especially for field sales, if you look at it, there's an element of relationship building which is involved because you're most of the time speaking to prospects in person and engaging with them. So that human in the loop and human to human connection is something which can't be replaced as of yet by AI. But there are a lot of other factors which are involved. So if you look at your sales process from start to the end, where you identify a potential lead or your target audience, your communication with the prospects, and then speaking to them. So in this entire process, you would notice that there is usually 80 to 20%, 80-20 ratio, I would say. Where 80% of your time is actually spent on doing all the things that you do beforehand before you get in front of the customer. So that could be something like doing research on the company, finding the potential buyer, procurement person, finding out what's happening in the company, things like that. But 20%, which carries if you look at it, it takes most of your results actually come from where you spend 20% of the time, and that's usually where you sit in front of the prospect or your target customer. So there's a difference of 80% of time being spent on manual work, 20% time being spent in front of the customer, building that relationship, engaging with them, handling objections, and that, if you look at it, the result is actually inverse. Now, the biggest potential what I feel AI can actually do is how can it increase that ratio from just 20 to maybe bring it to 50-50 at par, or potentially reduce that manual work altogether, so that the entire work that's being done by field sales is actually focused on just engaging with the prospect, doing what humans actually do the best. So that's where the biggest potential is. So if you're starting off, I think the simplest way to start is, I'm sure you would have used ChatGPT by now, Claude or Gemini. But being in field sales, the simplest and the quickest way to improve your productivity is start with making a few assistants. So some examples of that would be if you're doing email prospecting, you're sending emails to prospects. Let's say in a week you send about 20, 25, 30 emails to the prospect. Now what you can do is within ChatGPT or Claude, you can actually make it an assistant particularly for that purpose. So for example, if you look at the screen, you can just simply give it a prompt and give it an instruction that every time you want to send somebody an email, you want ChatGPT to generate that kind of email for you. So what it does is it saves you time rather than you having to spend time writing every email. You can get the basic structure from ChatGPT directly from it. So you could just simply mention something like, act like an expert copywriter focused on that particular industry, with this particular solution. Now, one thing to bear in mind is because ChatGPT has got knowledge, which potentially is combination of all the knowledge that is there out there. So, and the way to look at this is somebody the other day gave an example that it's the mean of that knowledge, average of that knowledge that exists. So the output that you get in the form of quality is not going to be very innovative or great. So you still will have to put some human touch in that, but you can still get a lot of benefit in terms of doing more of these emails to the prospects. So potentially if you were previously sending 25-30 emails in a week, now you can expand that up to 60 or 70. So that's a clear improvement and productivity gain. The second assistant that you can also do is you can make an assistant like objection handler. So if you get repeat objections from your prospects or from your clients, so you can just simply open a chat in ChatGPT and give it that detailed prompt that you want it to be. So every time you get an objection, based on that knowledge, it can give you that information. You can also attach brochures or things like that so that it can retrieve information from those materials. The third is a system which it can be really helpful for field sales is when you have meetings with the prospects. So most of the time field sales people, they're looking at multiple sources, so looking at websites, looking at the person on LinkedIn, looking at Google, stuff like that, depending upon what actually you're selling, to identify and find out about the company. So but if you create a detailed prompt on ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, it can give you that summary, and especially if you connect other tools with it. So rather than you exploring all these other tools in a fragmented way, you get that summary, or maybe tips on what questions to engage the prospect with, things like that. So these are three basic ideas around how you can start in terms of improving productivity, especially if you are in field sales with the help of AI. And rest of it obviously goes beyond that. Now once you have done these things, then the second aspect of using AI is actually, which is quite impressive, because humans, when it comes to doing things manually, there's a limit to it. So for example, if you look at it as an example, so if somebody was doing mathematical calculation just directly themselves versus somebody using Excel, so the key difference is a machine is calculating it, it knows what it is doing, but then especially when you do it for a broad set of data, so the time or the effort that it would take for humans to do versus that Excel is tremendous. So the same example applies to sales. Now within field sales, I think the tremendous opportunity lies where you can use some of the tools which can help you with the steps of the buying journey or the prospect process that you have. So this was the illustration which I feel clearly explains and shows the process and where AI tools currently exist and how they can help. Now the first is mapping out your target market. So a lot of times if you're in field sales, you might not exactly know the potential that exists in the territory or the region that you look after, or your team has. Now there are some specialist tools in the market like Apollo, and there are others as well, which can help you find all the key prospects that exist in those certain industries. So what it does is it accumulates the basis of whatever sources exist, so whether that's Google Maps or other websites, social media platforms. So something like that can save you a lot of time and give you clarity of your key target market. Now afterwards, what's also important is you have to see who actually are within that target audience, what kind of customers are there who you would actually want to target. So making a priority scoring framework. So for example, if you're in a space where you're only targeting businesses which are multi-sites or businesses that have got a certain level of revenue, so you can actually use orchestration tools, tools like Clay, tools like Artisan. What you can do is build a scoring framework so that those businesses the market that you have mapped out, you can then prioritize or shortlist and filter down the businesses that you want to prospect. And then you can link it with your CRM like HubSpot or Salesforce, and then you see, okay, so these are the businesses that are already my existing customers, and then these are the businesses that I want to actually target, and then you can filter it down. Now then afterwards, what you can do is you can then map out who the key decision makers are within that business. Now depending upon the industry and the company that you're working with, you might be using different channels, but most of the time the conversation is starting either by email or LinkedIn message or a phone call, which then goes on to in-person meeting, or you might be doing in-person prospecting, which is becoming less and less with time, to be honest. Now what you can do is you can use AI to actually find out the kind of decision makers that exist for your product or service that you're selling to for that business, and there are specialist tools that exist to do that. I would suggest maybe looking into orchestration tools. The benefit of orchestration tool is what they do is they can actually connect you or what you need with multiple tools that are part of their ecosystem. So how I said about finding your target market or mapping out the key decision makers, so all of that can happen actually within one tool that is also connected with your CRM. So once you find that, you can also then find out the business emails or the contact information through verified tools that exist in the market. And then you can what you can do is you can experiment with different versions of messaging, emails, angles with the help of AI. So based on the context of the business or based on the context of the person that you're reaching out to, you can then make your pitch accordingly. And that's where AI can be really helpful, because instead of doing cold outreach, what you can do is you can find out what this person has been doing previously, or what this person what kind of activity has this person been up to. Maybe they've attended some sort of podcast recently, so you could start your conversation or pitch from that, or you could find out what kind of initiatives are being done by this company at this stage, so you could use that as a reference. And the entire process of making an email copy that stands out is something that you can do with the help of AI, and then use your human touch in that to make sure that it actually stands out. And then lastly, once you have all of that, you can then instead of manually typing and sending emails, you can connect it via some sort of sequencer like Instantly or SmartLead, where what it does is all of the the copies that you've generated, it can actually send those on your behalf, and you can build multiple sequences or subsequences. So you know that this is the first email, this is the follow-up email, this is the third email, or things like that. So broadly, if you look at it, that's where the future is headed. Other industries, in B2B space, SaaS, particularly, they're quite ahead in this selling process. But all of these things are coming towards the field sales as well. So if you're in field sales, or if you're leading any field sales team, it's the right time to actually invest time into learning about these tools and how these can apply directly to the business that you're doing. Because at the end of the day, what the work that you're doing, it's not going to replace it, but AI is going to actually help you become 10x more focused and improve the overall productivity that is that you can actually have for yourself and for the business. Thank you for watching.